In front of his family, he threw my suitcase down the stairs. "Get out. You were always a burden," he spat. I left, holding back tears. 3 months later, his mother rang my doorbell, begging. He was broke. Turns out I owned the deed. That house. Never his. And I just sold it. "Get out. You were always a burden," Nathaniel spat, his words cutting through me like shards of glass. I watched in horror as my suitcase tumbled down the wooden staircase, clothes spilling across the foyer like scattered memories. His mother Ava stood behind him, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her thin lips. The rest of his family, gathered for their weekly Sunday brunch, simply watched in silence as if my humiliation was just another course in their meal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That devastating moment came later. My story begins with another kind of loss. Before I share how my life changed forever that Sunday morning, I want to thank you for joining me today. If you enjoy stories about finding strength when others underestimate you, consider subscribing. It's free and connects you with others who understand that sometimes the quietest revenge is the most satisfying. Now let me show you how I turned being thrown out of a house into the most empowering moment of my life. 3 months earlier, I stood in my childhood home, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the lingering scent of my mother's favorite lavender candles. The silence was deafening. Just 2 weeks ago, both my parents had been killed in a head-on collision with a drunk driver on Route 16. Now I was alone, sorting through their belongings, each item a painful reminder of what I'd lost. I picked up the framed photo from their wedding day. My father looking dapper in his rented tux, my mother radiant in her simple white dress. They weren't wealthy people. Dad worked 40 years at the local factory and Mom cleaned houses for families across town. They'd saved every penny to put me through nursing school, proud that I'd be the first in our family with a college degree. "Violet." I brought some more boxes from the garage. Nathaniel's voice pulled me from my thoughts. He'd been my rock these past 2 weeks, handling funeral arrangements, dealing with insurance companies, bringing me food when I forgot to eat. "Thanks," I managed, wiping tears with the back of my hand. I didn't realize they had so much stuff. Nathaniel wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "You don't have to do this all at once, you know. The estate agent said we have until the end of the month." The estate agent. Another reminder that I needed to sell my childhood home to cover my parents' modest debts and funeral expenses. There wouldn't be much left afterward. "What am I going to do, Nate?" I whispered, leaning into his embrace. "Where am I going to go?" His response came without hesitation. "You'll move in with me, of course." "With us. Mom's been wanting to meet you properly anyway." I'd only met Ava Prescott once, briefly at a restaurant. She'd seemed reserved. But Nathaniel spoke so highly of her and I was desperate for connection, for family. "Are you sure she won't mind?" I asked. Nathaniel turned me around, cupping my face. "It's my house too, Violet. I inherited it from my grandfather. And I want you there." 2 days later, I pulled into the driveway of the Prescott family home, a well-maintained colonial in a respectable neighborhood. Nathaniel carried my suitcases while I clutched a box containing the few keepsakes I couldn't bear to part with. Ava greeted us at the door, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Violet dear, what a difficult time for you." Her hug was brief, perfunctory. "Nathaniel, show her to the guest room, would you?" "Guest room?" Nathaniel frowned. "Mom, I told you Violet would be staying in my room." "Unmarried, under my roof?" Ava's eyebrows rose. "I don't think so. What would Pastor Richard say?" I felt my cheeks burn. "The guest room is fine, really." That night, as I unpacked my meager belongings, Ava appeared in the doorway. "Nathaniel says you're a nurse?" "Yes," I replied, hanging up my uniform. "I work at Mercy General." She glanced around the room. "Well, I suppose that's better than nothing." Though I always hoped Nathaniel would find someone who could stay home like I did. "Family should come first, don't you think?" Before I could respond, she added, "Breakfast is at 7 sharp. I don't keep food out all day." The first few weeks in the Prescott home were a blur of grief and adjustment. Nathaniel left for work early. He managed commercial properties for a local real estate developer, and returned late. I worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital, trying to lose myself in caring for others when I could barely care for myself. Gradually, I began to notice changes in Nathaniel. He wanted to know where I was going and with whom. He'd check my phone when he thought I wasn't looking. When my friend Jess texted to invite me for coffee, he suggested I was too busy settling in to socialize. You know, her husband left her last year, he remarked. I don't think she's the best influence right now. Then came the comments about money. When I offered to contribute to household expenses, Nathaniel insisted I save what little I had. Yet somehow my salary became a joint resource. He'd ask to borrow from my account for vague expenses. When I got my first paycheck after returning to work, he took me shopping for new ties for himself. You work too hard to worry about finances, he'd say, taking my debit card. Let me handle it. Ava's criticism became a daily companion. My cooking was too bland. My cleaning wasn't thorough enough. My uniform was inappropriately fitted. When I brought home leftover hospital cafeteria cookies for dessert, she remarked, "Oh, how economical of you." One evening, after a particularly grueling shift where I'd lost a patient, I collapsed on the edge of the bed and scrolled through nursing job postings. The hospital was cutting hours and I needed more income if I was ever going to get back on my feet. Nathaniel entered, loosening his tie. "What are you looking at?" "There's a position at Cedar Creek Hospital. Better pay, more regular hours." "Cedar Creek? That's 40 minutes away." His voice hardened. "You're not considering that, are you?" "I need the money, Nate. And it's a step up." "Need money?" He laughed sharply. "What for? You live here rent-free. I pay for everything." "That's just it," I said, straightening my spine. "I don't want to depend on you for everything. I want to stand on my own 2 feet. Use my degree for something meaningful." "Meaningful?" His face flushed. "What about supporting me? Being here when I need you?" "Mom's right. You're so focused on your career that you can't see what's important. What's important is that I don't lose myself." I hadn't meant to raise my voice, but weeks of bottled emotions came pouring out. My parents worked themselves to the bone so I could have this career, this independence. Independence. He grabbed my phone, jabbing at the screen. "Is that what this is about? You want to leave? After everything I've done for you?" "That's not. I took you in when you had nothing." His shout echoed through the house. "I gave you a home, family, and this is how you repay me." I heard Ava's footsteps in the hallway, pausing outside our door. "Listening." "Nathaniel, please." I lowered my voice. "I'm grateful, truly. But I need something of my own." His expression shifted, anger morphing into something colder, more calculated. "Fine. Apply for your job. But don't expect me to rearrange my life for your career ambitions." That night, he slept in the guest room, and I lay awake wondering how my safe harbor had so quickly become another storm to weather. What I didn't know then was that the real tempest was just beginning, and that my life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. The morning after our argument, Nathaniel acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work, his smile a little too bright, his tone a little too cheerful. But something had shifted between us. A hairline fracture in what I once thought was solid ground. I had the day off and decided to finish clearing out my parents' house. The realtor was bringing potential buyers tomorrow, and I needed to remove the last of our belongings from the garage and workshop where Dad had spent countless weekends tinkering with old radios and building birdhouses for Mom's garden. The April morning was crisp as I pulled into the driveway one last time. Every visit felt like ripping off a bandage, exposing the raw wound of grief underneath. I unlocked the side door to Dad's workshop, dust motes dancing in the slanted sunlight through the windows. I worked methodically, sorting tools to donate, tossing worthless junk, and setting aside the few keepsakes I could justify keeping in my limited space at Nathaniel's house. In the back corner, partially hidden by an old tarp, stood Dad's heavy toolbox, a massive steel behemoth he'd bought at an estate sale 20 years ago. The bottom drawers stuck as they always had. I yanked harder, the metal finally giving way with a screech. Inside lay Dad's precision tools, each in its designated spot. Something about the drawer's dimensions seemed off, though. It wasn't as deep as it should be given the height of the toolbox. Curious, I removed the tools and felt along the bottom. My fingers caught on a nearly invisible seam. A false bottom. With trembling hands, I pried up the metal panel. Stacks of cash lay neatly arranged beneath, $100 bills bound with rubber bands, each stack exactly the same height. Beside them was a sealed envelope with my name written in Dad's careful handwriting. With shaking fingers I tore it open. Violet, if you're reading this, then your mother and I are gone. This money was meant for your education, but we managed without touching it. There's $1.1 million here. The result of your grandfather's life insurance policy that came to me when you were just a baby. Mom wanted to tell you about it, but I insisted we save it for when you might truly need it. Seems that time has come. Don't let anyone know about this money until you decide what to do with it. People change when money's involved. We love you, Firefly. Make good choices. Dad. I sat on the concrete floor, letter clutched to my chest, surrounded by the ghosts of my parents and the weight of their final gift. An hour passed before I could move, before I could think clearly enough to form a plan. I couldn't take this much cash to Nathaniel's house. Not with Ava's prying eyes, and especially not after witnessing how Nathaniel had begun controlling my modest nursing salary. I drove to 3 different banks in neighboring towns, opening new accounts at each, distributing the money to minimize questions. By afternoon the cash was secured, the letter hidden in my bra and the false bottom replaced in the toolbox. On the drive back to Nathaniel's, my phone rang through the car speakers. His voice filled the space, uncharacteristically tense. Where have you been? I've called 4 times. At my parents' house, I replied, guilt inexplicably washing over me. Final cleanup before the showing tomorrow. Well, hurry home. We need to talk. It's important. When I arrived, Nathaniel was pacing in the kitchen, his usually immaculate hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. Ava sat at the table, her face a mask of concern. There you are, Nathaniel said, pulling me into a tight embrace. I've been worried sick. I told you where I was. I pulled back, studying his face. What's wrong? He guided me to the table, his hand firm on my lower back. I need to talk to you about something. A business opportunity. What followed was a carefully rehearsed pitch about a sure-thing investment property. Nathaniel's eyes gleamed as he described the potential returns, how this one deal could set us up for life. All he needed was capital, specifically whatever I'd received from selling my parents' house. The sale hasn't gone through yet, I said carefully, and the proceeds will barely cover their outstanding medical bills and funeral costs. But surely there must be something, he pressed. Insurance? Retirement accounts? Your father worked for decades at that factory. I shook my head, the letter burning against my skin. There's nothing, Nate. They lived paycheck to paycheck. Later that night, as Nathaniel showered, a notification popped up on his laptop, which he'd left open on the bed. An email from someone named Marcus. Final notice, payment due. My stomach knotted. I shouldn't look. It was an invasion of privacy. But something about Nathaniel's desperation earlier pushed me forward. The email detailed missed payments on a high-interest loan. References to previous extensions. Threats of legal action. I quickly searched through his email, finding dozens of similar messages dating back months. Then I noticed the folder labeled Statements. Inside were PDFs of credit card bills with staggering balances, loan agreements with predatory terms, and notices from collection agencies. Nathaniel was drowning in debt. I closed the laptop just as the shower shut off. While he dressed, I feigned sleep, my mind racing. The next morning, I waited until he left for work before searching his desk. Hidden beneath tax documents were more statements, at least 6 maxed-out credit cards and 3 personal loans. The total approached $400,000. Over the next week, something strange happened. Nathaniel transformed into the attentive, loving boyfriend I'd first met. He brought me flowers, suggested weekend getaways, and one evening over an expensive dinner I couldn't understand how he could afford, he took my hand across the table. Let's get married, he said simply. Next week. Just us and a few family members at the courthouse. I hesitated, thoughts of his debts and my hidden inheritance swirling together. Why the rush? Life's too short, he replied, squeezing my hand. Your parents taught us that. I don't want to waste another day not being your husband. Maybe it was vulnerability. Maybe it was fear of being alone. Whatever the reason, I heard myself say yes. The courthouse ceremony was brief. Ava, her sister, and Nathaniel's cousin served as witnesses. No one from my side. I had no family left, and Nathaniel had convinced me not to burden my friends who were busy with their own lives. At the celebratory lunch afterward, Ava cornered me in the restaurant bathroom. Now that you're officially family, she said, reapplying her lipstick, we should discuss your contribution to the household. Nathaniel mentioned your parents' estate might be settled soon. The lie came easily. There is no estate. Just debts. She studied me in the mirror. Funny, Nathaniel seemed to think otherwise. That night, as we lay in bed in what was now our room, Nathaniel's phone rang. He answered groggily, then sat bolt upright, taking the call in the hallway. I could only make out fragments, extension, impossible timeline, working on a solution. When he returned, his face was ashen. Who was that? I asked. Wrong number, he muttered, turning away. But at 2 a.m., thinking I was asleep, he made a call from the bathroom, door closed, voice low but urgent. I pressed my ear to the door. It's Nathaniel Prescott regarding the property on Oak Lane. Yes, I understand the foreclosure proceedings have begun, but there's been a development. I'm getting married. Well, I just did today. My wife has an inheritance coming. I just need 30 more days. I backed away silently, heart pounding. Suddenly, the rushed wedding, the questions about my parents' assets, the mounting debt, it all formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. Nathaniel hadn't married me for love. He'd married me for money he thought I had. I spent the next week in a fog of disbelief, replaying Nathaniel's late-night conversation in my mind. Each morning, I'd wake beside him, watching him sleep, trying to reconcile the man I thought I married with the one who saw me as a financial solution. When he kissed me goodbye each morning, I forced myself to smile, to play the role of newlywed while my insides twisted with hurt and betrayal. On Tuesday, Nathaniel mentioned a client meeting that would run late. Don't wait up for dinner, he said, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror. This could be a big deal, exactly what we need right now. Something in his tone, a slight tremor perhaps, raised my suspicions. After he left, I called the hospital and switched shifts with a coworker. Then I waited 20 minutes before following him in my car. Instead of heading downtown toward his office, Nathaniel drove to Oak Ridge, an affluent suburb across town. I maintained a careful distance, heart pounding as he pulled into the parking lot of Prestige Properties, a high-end real estate agency. Through the plate glass windows, I watched him shake hands with a woman in a tailored suit, her smile wide and professional as she led him to her desk. I parked behind a delivery truck, cracked my window and dialed Sarah Reynolds, my friend since third grade who now worked for a competing real estate firm. Violet, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. How are you holding up? I need your help, I said, watching Nathaniel gesturing animatedly through the window. Can you run a property search for me? Right now. 20 minutes later, Sarah texted me screenshots of property records for the house on Oak Lane, Nathaniel's family home. According to county records, the property had been in the Prescott family for 3 generations, but most recently had been remortgaged twice. The outstanding loan amount was nearly equal to the property's value, and payments were 4 months in arrears. Foreclosure proceedings had begun last month. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Nathaniel's financial desperation, the hasty marriage, the constant questions about my parents' estate. I watched him exit the realtor's office with a folder tucked under his arm, his stride purposeful, relieved. Before driving away, he checked his reflection in the car window and straightened his shoulders. A man who believed he'd found his way out of a crisis. That evening, I waited until he showered before checking his briefcase. Inside was a listing agreement for the house, our house, with a note scrawled in the margin, 30 days max before bank action. The asking price was well below market value, a desperate attempt for a quick sale. As I slipped the document back, my hands shook with anger and an emotion I couldn't immediately identify. It took me a moment to recognize it, opportunity. The next day I met Sarah at a diner far from town, where no one would recognize us. I still don't understand, she said, stirring creamer into her coffee. Why would he list the house without telling you? Especially now that you're married. I explained everything, the debts, the midnight phone call, the rushed wedding. He thinks I'm coming into money from my parents. Money he plans to use to solve his problems. Sarah's expression hardened. That's not just dishonest, Vi. It's financial abuse. I know. But there's something else. I lowered my voice. I do have money. A lot of it. My dad left me over $1 million that no one knows about. Her coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Are you serious? Completely. And I think I know exactly what to do with some of it. Over the next hour we formulated a plan. Sarah would monitor the listing. Once it went active she would represent an anonymous buyer. A shell company I would create with help from an attorney Sarah recommended. We would offer cash, slightly above asking price to ensure acceptance, with a contingency that the current occupants could remain for 60 days after closing, long enough for me to figure out my next move. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked as we parted. It's a lot of money and he's your husband. He married me for what he could get from me, I replied, a cold certainty settling in my chest. I'm just making sure he gets exactly what he deserves. 2 days later the listing went live. Sarah called me immediately, and I authorized her to make the offer through my newly established LLC. By that evening, Nathaniel returned home practically floating, loosening his tie with a flourish. Good news? I asked innocently, setting down my nursing textbook. The best, he replied, pouring himself a generous whiskey. A business investment finally paid off. We should celebrate this weekend. He didn't mention the house sale. Not one word. The following Monday, Nathaniel announced he needed to travel to Chicago for meetings. Just 2 nights, he assured me, kissing my forehead. When I get back we'll talk about our future. I have some exciting ideas. The moment his car pulled away I texted Sarah. We met at Cornerstone Coffee across town, where the attorney waited with a stack of documents. I read each page carefully before signing, the weight of what I was doing both terrifying and exhilarating. Congratulations, the attorney said, shaking my hand. You now own the property at 1847 Oak Lane. I wrote a check for the full amount plus closing costs, $423,000. A fortune to most people but less than half of my inheritance. Worth every penny for what would come next. That night I wandered through the house, my house, with new eyes trailing my fingers along the walls, studying the family photos Ava had arranged so precisely. In each one, Nathaniel stood proudly beside his mother, his father noticeably absent even in older pictures. Had Ava's controlling nature driven him away? Was that the pattern Nathaniel was unconsciously recreating? I paused at the bedroom door, watching Ava sort laundry, completely unaware that her precious family home now belonged to the woman she treated as an intruder. She looked up, startled to find me observing her. Did you need something? She asked, her perpetual annoyance barely concealed. No, I replied with a small smile. I have everything I need. For the next several weeks I maintained the charade. Nathaniel became increasingly upbeat as the closing date approached, making vague references to positive changes coming soon. He started treating me with unexpected generosity. Small gifts, compliments, even defending me when Ava criticized my cooking. She's my wife, he'd say, flashing me a smile that no longer reached my heart. Show her some respect. I smiled back each time, playing my part perfectly while thinking of the documents locked in my safety deposit box across town. The deed to the house we stood in, the proof that every word between us had become part of an elaborate fiction. Sometimes at night, lying beside the man I once thought I loved, I wondered if I'd gone too far. But then I'd remember his voice in that bathroom. My wife has an inheritance coming. Not our future, not our life together, just what he could take from me. In those moments, I knew the house of lies we'd built together was destined to collapse. I was simply ensuring I wouldn't be buried in the rubble. The closing date for the house came and went. Though I now legally owned the property, Nathaniel had no idea. He expected the funds to appear in his account any day, growing more agitated with each passing hour. His mask of affection began to slip, revealing the desperation underneath. There must be some hold-up with the paperwork, he muttered one evening, checking his phone for the 15th time in an hour. The realtor promised the buyer was solid. These things take time, I offered, carefully neutral. Real estate transactions are complicated. He shot me a sharp look. What would you know about it? As days stretched into weeks with no money appearing in his account, the atmosphere in the house grew toxic. Ava began reorganizing the home, which somehow always resulted in my possessions being relocated to less desirable spaces. My nursing textbooks disappeared from the living room bookshelf, replaced by her collection of porcelain birds. My framed nursing degree vanished from the hallway wall. Where are my things? I asked one afternoon, searching for the handmade quilt my grandmother had sewn. Ava barely glanced up from her crossword puzzle. I put them in the basement for now. This is a Prescott home, dear. It should reflect our family history, not yours. I bit my tongue, remembering the deed with my name on it locked safely away. Our family history. If only she knew. That evening, I found my clothes pushed to one side of the closet, with half the hangers removed to make space for Ava's winter coats. In the bathroom, my toiletries had been boxed up and placed under the sink while Ava's expensive creams claimed the counter space. Your mother seems to be reclaiming territory, I mentioned to Nathaniel as we prepared for bed. She's lived here her whole life, Violet, he snapped. You've been here 5 minutes. Maybe try adapting instead of complaining. His words stung, but the coldness behind them hurt more. The man who had held me through my grief, who had promised to be my shelter in the storm, was gone. In his place stood a stranger whose eyes calculated my worth in dollars and cents, and found me wanting. The bank called Nathaniel the next day. I could hear his raised voice from the kitchen, phrases like, impossible time frame, and already sold the property, drifting through the house. When he emerged, his face was ashen. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Fine, he barked. Just business. That night he didn't come home until after midnight, reeking of whiskey. I pretended to be asleep as he stumbled around the bedroom, cursing under his breath when he banged his shin on the dresser. The next morning, Ava informed me they would be hosting a dinner party that evening. Nathaniel's business associates, she explained briskly. Very important for his career. I'll handle the cooking, of course. Your attempts at entertaining would hardly impress them. I nodded meekly, playing my part. I'll make myself scarce. Oh no, she replied with a thin smile. You should be there. You are his wife after all. The dinner party consisted of 4 couples, all connected to Nathaniel's real estate world. I wore my best dress, a simple navy blue sheath that had been relegated to the back of the closet. As I entered the dining room, Nathaniel barely acknowledged me, deep in conversation with a silver-haired man who seemed to command the room's attention. Marcus, this is my wife, Violet, Nathaniel finally said when I approached with wine to refill their glasses. I froze. Marcus. The name from the emails about Nathaniel's debts. Ah, the nurse, Marcus said without warmth. Nathaniel mentioned you were working class. Conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Whenever I tried to contribute, Nathaniel would subtly talk over me or change the subject. By dessert, the discussion had turned to investments and property values. What do you think of the market right now, Violet? Asked a woman whose name I'd already forgotten. Before I could respond, Nathaniel laughed sharply. Violet doesn't concern herself with finance. He's more hands-on, changing bedpans and such. The table fell awkwardly silent. My cheeks burned. Actually, I said quietly, I work in the cardiac care unit. We save lives. And we're very proud, Nathaniel replied condescendingly, patting my hand. But let's face it, honey, your contribution to this household is minimal. Financially speaking. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of humiliation. After the guests left, I confronted Nathaniel in the kitchen. How could you speak to me like that? In front of everyone. Like what? He slurred, the evening's drinks evident in his unsteady stance. I was just being honest. You contribute nothing here. Nothing. I'm your wife. A wife is supposed to be an asset. His voice turned ugly. So far you've been nothing but a liability. I slept in the guest room that night, listening to Ava and Nathaniel arguing downstairs, their voices rising and falling like waves against rocks. My name floated up the stairs, followed by phrases about expectations and disappointment. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. Ava's family, her sister, brother-in-law and their adult children, arrived promptly at 10 for their weekly brunch tradition. I dressed carefully in jeans and a simple blouse, steeling myself for another performance in their ongoing family drama. The tension was palpable as Ava served her famous blueberry pancakes. Nathaniel hadn't spoken a word to me all morning, his jaw tight, eyes bloodshot from another night of drinking. His cousin Jeffrey kept glancing between us nervously while Ava chattered about church gossip, her voice unnaturally bright. When my phone rang, I excused myself to answer it. It was Sarah. The bank is moving up their timeline, she warned. Your attorney says you should start the eviction process soon if Everything okay out there? Nathaniel called from the dining room, his voice sharp with suspicion. Just work, I replied, ending the call quickly. Nothing important. I rejoined the table, feeling all eyes on me. Nathaniel's gaze was particularly intense, as if trying to peel back my skin and see what lay beneath. Who was that? He demanded. Just the hospital. They wanted to know if I could pick up an extra shift. Liar. The word fell like a stone. I saw the name on your screen. Your realtor friend. The table went silent. Ava froze, fork halfway to her mouth. Why would Sarah be calling you? Nathaniel continued, rising slowly from his chair. Unless you know something about my house sale falling through? I don't know what you're talking about, I managed, my heart hammering. 3 weeks, he hissed. 3 weeks since closing with no money. The bank calling every day. And suddenly your friend from the competing agency is calling on a Sunday morning. He advanced toward me and I instinctively backed toward the stairs. What did you do? His voice rose with each word. Did you interfere? Did you tell the buyers something? Nathaniel, you're scaring me. I want you out, he snarled, grabbing my arm. Pack your things and get out of my house. Nate, stop. I tried to pull away but his grip tightened. I took you in when you had nothing, he shouted, dragging me toward the stairs. I gave you everything. You married me for money. I finally screamed back. You thought I had an inheritance. The silence that followed was deafening. Ava rose from her chair, her face a mask of shock. The others stared, frozen in their seats. Get your things, Nathaniel said, his voice deadly quiet. Now. With shaking hands, I threw whatever I could grab into my suitcase. Some clothes, my nursing badge, basic toiletries. As I lugged it toward the stairs, Nathaniel snatched it from my hands and flung it down the staircase. It burst open on impact, my belongings scattering across the foyer like autumn leaves. Get out, he spat, his family watching in stunned silence behind him. You were always a burden. I descended the stairs slowly, dignity the only thing I had left to hold on to. As I gathered my scattered possessions, no one moved to help me. No one spoke a word of protest. Outside, I threw my hastily repacked suitcase into my car and drove away, vision blurred with tears. I had $230 in my wallet. My fun money for the month that Nathaniel allowed me to keep from my own salary. That night, I checked into the Sunset Motel on the edge of town, a place that rented rooms by the week to people down on their luck. As I sat on the lumpy mattress, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, a strange calm settled over me. I owned the house I'd just been thrown out of. And Nathaniel had no idea what was coming next. The Sunset Motel became my home for exactly 3 nights. The paper-thin walls, the lingering scent of cigarettes, and the constant drone of the ice machine outside my door were daily reminders of how quickly life could change. But I refused to wallow. On the 4th day, I found a 1-bedroom apartment in a modest complex across town, using a small portion of my inheritance for the security deposit and first month's rent. The apartment was sparse, just a bedroom, bathroom, and combined living room/kitchen with worn carpet and outdated appliances. But it was mine. No Ava rearranging my belongings. No Nathaniel monitoring my comings and goings. For the first time since my parents died, I could breathe freely. I requested extra shifts at the hospital, volunteering specifically for night rotation. The work kept my mind occupied, and the schedule meant I could handle legal matters during business hours. More importantly, it reduced the chances of running into Nathaniel or his family around town. 2 weeks after moving out, my phone lit up with a text from Nathaniel. We need to talk. The bank is threatening foreclosure. I know you're angry, but this affects you too. You're still my wife. I left it unanswered, a small act of power that felt surprisingly good. The texts continued, evolving from demanding to cajoling to increasingly desperate as days passed. Violet, please. I made a mistake. We can work this out. The electric company is threatening to cut service. This is serious. My mother is beside herself with worry. This house has been in our family for generations. I've been trying to reach you about the mortgage. The bank won't work with me anymore. Each message confirmed what I already knew. Nathaniel was drowning. The house sale he'd counted on had mysteriously fallen through. The debts were piling up. And now his wife, his financial lifeline, had disappeared. I met with the attorney Sarah had recommended, A sharp-eyed woman named Elena Martinez who specialized in real estate law. The property is entirely yours, she confirmed, sliding the deed across her desk. You purchased it legally through your LLC. The previous owner, your husband, signed all the necessary paperwork. And the bank? I asked. The mortgage. Paid in full at closing. There is no mortgage. You own it free and clear. She leaned forward, her expression serious. The question is, what do you want to do with it now? I thought about the house, the place where I'd sought refuge after losing my parents, where I'd experienced both love and betrayal, where I'd learned painful but necessary lessons about trust. I want to sell it, I said finally. Start fresh. Elena nodded. Given the circumstances, I recommend using a different realtor than the one who handled your purchase. No connection to your husband or his associates. Within days, a for sale sign appeared in the front yard of 1847 Oak Lane. I drove by once, keeping a safe distance, and saw Nathaniel standing on the porch, staring at the sign in visible confusion. Sarah kept me updated. He's been calling our office daily, demanding to know how the house can be listed when he never completed the sale. What does your broker tell him? That the sale was completed. That the new owner is exercising their right to resell. She paused. He's becoming unhinged, Vi. Yesterday he threatened legal action. Let him try, I replied, a coldness settling in my chest where warmth for him had once lived. Every document has his signature. 3 days later an offer came in, above asking price with a quick closing timeline. I accepted immediately. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd anticipated. On a rainy Tuesday morning my doorbell rang. Through the peephole I saw Ava Prescott standing in the hallway, her usual perfect appearance notably disheveled. Her hair hung limp around her face, her makeup was minimal, and her designer clothes had been replaced by a simple sweater and jeans I'd never seen her wear. I considered not answering. But curiosity won out. Violet. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. May I come in? I stepped aside wordlessly. She entered, eyes darting around my modest apartment with none of her usual judgment. I know what you did, she said finally, setting her purse on my counter. The house. Somehow you bought it. I remained silent, watching emotions play across her face. Anger, confusion, and something I'd never seen there before. Fear. How? She demanded. Where did you get that kind of money? My parents weren't as destitute as you and Nathaniel assumed, I replied evenly. They left me more than grief. She closed her eyes briefly. I see. Why are you here, Ava? We received an eviction notice yesterday. 30 days to vacate. Her hands trembled slightly. That house has been in our family since my grandfather built it in 1953. Nathaniel was supposed to raise his children there. His children, Violet. The implication hung in the air between us. Children that would never be mine and Nathaniel's now. Please, she said, the word clearly unfamiliar on her tongue. We need more time. Nathaniel is struggling. This has all been too much for him. Too much. I repeated incredulously. He threw me out with nothing but a suitcase. In front of your entire family. He was angry. Desperate. She reached for my hand, which I subtly withdrew. We both said terrible things. Made mistakes. No, Ava. You and Nathaniel were exactly who you are. The mistake was mine for not seeing it sooner. She straightened, some of her old haughtiness returning. So this is revenge, then? Buying our home out from under us. This is justice, I corrected her. Nathaniel married me believing I had money he could use to solve his problems. He lied to me about the house, about his finances, about everything. I simply ensured he faced the consequences of his actions. By making us homeless? Her voice cracked. You have 30 days and substantial resources. I had hours and $200. I moved toward the door. The eviction timeline stands. As I opened the door, she made one last desperate attempt. He still loves you. He's been a wreck since you left. I smiled sadly. No, Ava. He loved what he thought I could give him. There's a difference. After she left, I sat on my second-hand couch, surprised by the absence of satisfaction I'd expected to feel. Instead, I felt only a quiet certainty that I'd done what was necessary to reclaim my life. The closing date arrived exactly 3 months after the day Nathaniel had thrown my suitcase down the stairs. I met the new owners, a young couple with a toddler and another baby on the way, at the house for the final walkthrough. They were excited about the space, already planning nursery colors and garden layouts. As I handed them the keys, movement across the street caught my eye. Nathaniel sat in his car watching. Our eyes met through the windshield. I didn't wave or acknowledge him. There was nothing left to say. The young couple thanked me profusely before heading inside to begin measuring for furniture. I walked to my car feeling lighter with each step. The money from the sale would go back into my inheritance fund. The nursing degree my parents had sacrificed for would continue to provide my daily bread. And the lessons learned in that house, about love, betrayal, and self-worth, would guide me forward. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Nathaniel was still there, watching the house that had never truly been his. I felt no triumph, no vindication, only release. The chains of his deception no longer bound me. The house that lies built had finally crumbled, but I was still standing. And that was victory enough. If you enjoyed watching Violet reclaim her power and serve justice cold, hit that like button and subscribe for more satisfying stories of sweet revenge. Sometimes the best victories are the ones no one sees coming. Just like Nathaniel never saw that deed with my name on it.